Hi, I'm Brian Strickland with American Sanders, and today we're going to refinish a hardwood floor. We're going to use the American Sanders line of equipment that you can find at most rental centers around the country. We're going to show you some tricks of the trade. We're going to show you how to use all equipment properly, and by the time we're done, you're going to know how to refinish your own hardwood floor. Before you get started on your project, you need to determine what kind of wood floor that you have. There are multiple varieties. There's solid flooring, there's pre-finished flooring, engineered flooring. Only some of these can be sanded and refinished. And if you put a sanding machine on the wrong type of floor, you'll be very disappointed with the result. So you need to determine exactly what you have. Let's take a look. Let's first talk about the solid tongue and groove style floors. These floors are usually 3/4 of an inch thick. They are meant to last a lifetime, and their thick wear layer allows them to be sanded multiple times during their usable life. Factory finished floors are also solid wood, but depending on the brand and make of the floor, the wear layer may not be as thick as solid wood flooring. This type of flooring can be resanded very nicely. Then there's engineered flooring, which is made to look like solid wood flooring, but actually is made up of thin layers of wood laminate glued together. This type of floor usually has a very thin wear layer of wood and cannot be sanded and refinished more than once in its lifetime. Unless you have a high level of confidence that your engineered floor has enough of a wear layer to handle a resanding project, then I would not recommend trying to resand it. As for the vinyl flooring, this product is not real wood and cannot be refinished through a sanding process. There are a number of ways to determine which kind of flooring you have. For instance, if you know how old the flooring is, you can make some assumptions about the type of the floor you're working with. Prior to the mid-1980s, wood floors were almost exclusively made from solid wood flooring. So if the floor you're working on was laid prior to that time period, then you have a large confidence level that the floor is solid wood. For factory finished or engineered wood flooring, there's a very distinct characteristic specific to these type of floors. It's called a micro bevel, and it is visible where two pieces of wood come together. If your floor has this feature, then it is either factory finished or an engineered floor. Another way to determine the type of floor is to inspect the area around a heating vent or the area where the wood floor butts up against the carpet or some other type of flooring. Before you get started, you want to inspect the condition of your floor. Understanding the condition that your floor is in is actually going to help you select which sanding machine to use. We've got a dining room here, about 110 square feet. Looks like 1.25 inch oak. It's in pretty good condition. The floor is actually reasonably flat, so we're not dealing with any kind of cupping or crowning situation that's going to be a problem. We do have some water damage that we're going to need to be aware of as we sand. Might have to spend some more time there making sure that we get that area cleaned up as much as possible, but generally speaking, this floor is in reasonably good shape. It's just old and some of the finish has worn off. I'm going to use the drum sander in this condition because I've got some open space here and I can be really productive with that machine and knock this project out fairly quickly. There are two distinct flooring issues either created by too much humidity or too little humidity in a house. A cupped floor, which is where the edges of the wood actually curls up and is higher than the middle of the floor, that's caused by too much moisture or too much humidity. The reverse of that is a crown floor where the center is higher than the edges. Both of these are issues that can be corrected temporarily with sanding, but really need to be handled long-term with handling the humidity or moisture issues that you might have in your house. There are a few safety items that you should consider wearing during your project. Certainly eyeglasses, whether it's your standard prescription glasses or safety glasses or goggles beyond that. A respirator, most of these machines have dust containment systems, but if you have a machine without dust control, you're certainly going to wear a respirator in order to keep yourself healthy in that regard. Hearing protection is always important. These machines, while they're not overly loud, they certainly do make noise. And then knee protection is certainly a comfort level. You're going to spend a lot of time on your knees prepping this floor and hand scraping and the other types of things we're going to show you how to do. So knee protection is also recommended. Once you determine that your floor is a good candidate for sanding and refinishing, make your way to the rental center and select your rental equipment. There's going to be a variety of different machines to choose from, each with a little bit of a different feature set that might be more ideal to your project versus another. We'll talk about what these machines do and why they're different, and then you can select the right one for your project. The Easy 8 drum sander is going to be the most aggressive machine that you can rent as a homeowner. Plugs right into your standard wall, 110 volts. but it's going to allow you to flatten your floor. It's going to be the most productive and the fastest one that you can use. It requires a little bit of a skill set and some practice in order to understand how to do it right. But if you've got a floor that's in bad condition and you've got the skills to go ahead and run this equipment, it's going to be the one that you're going to be happiest with. Most of these bigger machines that you rent to sand your floor, they won't get all the way up to the wall, so you're going to have to rent an edger. An edger specifically does that last 2 or 3 inches around the room right up to the wall line. The Rotary Sander is an aggressive machine that you can also use to flatten your floor and can be used on floors that aren't in great shape. This machine requires also a little bit of a skill set, can be difficult to use, and is slower than the drum machine, but can get into some tighter spaces. Orbital sanders are the easiest sanding machines to use. They don't have to be run with the grain. You can run them in any direction. They can be run by anybody. You're not going to damage your floor with an orbital sander. The drawback to the orbital sander is that it's just going to be much slower than the drum sander or a rotary sander. Sandpaper is going to be really important in terms of your selection. You want to start with the finest grit you can and actually still sand the floor flat. So in most cases you want to start with a 36 grit, maybe a 40 grit. That's going to be enough. I think that's going to be enough for us to start on this floor and get it cut flat. Then we're going to skip 2 grits for our medium cut. So if we start with 36, we're going to skip 40 and go to 50, maybe 60 if that's what's available. And then we're going to skip 2 more grits and go from 60 to say 80 or maybe 100, depending on what's available to you at your local rental center. So our project has a 3/4 inch quarter round used as shoe molding all the way around the room. Trick of the trade. You can do one of 2 things. You can either leave this shoe molding in place and actually use the edger and edge all the way up to it. You don't have to then worry about removing any of this molding. Or you can remove this molding and then not have to edge exactly all the way up to the wall. That'll give you a little bit of a margin of error when you're running that edger around the room. You put the shoe molding back in place, nobody's gonna know how close you actually got to the wall. If you do that, another trick of the trade, mark on your shoe molding a 1 or a 2 or whatever the number is, and then put the coinciding number on the wall where you took this from. Later on, when you get that shoe molding and you put it back in place, you'll be able to line it back up with exactly where you took it from. So 2 more tricks of the trade for you before we get started sanding. One of the things you need to do is make sure that you have set all the nails in the wood that might be exposed. If you don't set the nails below the level of the wood, you're going to run that over with the sander. You're going to put a little bit of a damage in the sandpaper, and that damage in the sandpaper will actually transfer to the floor. So we're going to use nail sets, and we're going to use a hammer. And the thing that we're going to do that's a trick of the trade is make sure to use some sort of towel or some sort of soft item that you can actually put the hammer on and the nail sets as you're working around the floor. Any kind of damage you put in the floor now with the hammer by dropping it on the floor, you're going to have to take that damage out with the sander. So we want to prevent that up front. The other trick of the trade I want to talk to you about is blue tape. We're going to take blue tape and we're going to put it around all the edges of the corners, because as we're moving this sander back and forth along the floor, we're going to be dragging the power cord behind us. And the most likely place for that power cord to get hung up and rub the paint off the wall is going to be on the corners of the molding. So we're going to wrap those corners in blue tape. So we're almost ready to get started sanding this floor. Before we do, let's talk about the process a little bit. It's important when you're using a drum sander that you actually sand with the grain. The whole point there is that on our rough cut, our very first cut, that's what we're going to use to actually flatten the floor. But the rough cut's going to put a lot of deep scratches into the floor, and we want to do that with the grain because that will actually hide the scratches better. Then we're going to have 2 more cuts after the rough cut. We're going to have the medium cut and then the fine cut, and those 2 cuts are just designed to hide those initial scratches. If you have the expander style drum with the sleeve paper, it's really simple to install. You simply slide it on the end of the cylinder and push it right into place. All right, so to install on a clamp style drum, you're actually going to have to back out these screws, loosen this bar plate up, and then you're going to take this piece of paper and you're going to slide it up underneath that clamp. So to operate the Easy 8 to sand your floor, again, you're going to make sure you go with the grain, one pass up and one pass back in the exact same spot. Then you're going to move over about half the drum and then take your next pass also. A couple of things to realize. One is this machine, when the drum's in contact with the floor, you want to be moving. If you stop while the drum's in contact with the floor, you're going to leave what's called a drum mark. We'll address some of that a little bit later. There's a handle on this machine that's going to control that drum. You're going to have one of two styles, either just this top handle here you might find on the machine you rent, or you might also have this finger lever. And if you have that, then you have the option of either just controlling this with your fingers, or again, you can control it with the main handle as it goes up and down. One thing I want to point out to you also is as you go up and down on your pass, the best thing to do is to stagger where you stop. So don't always stop in the same spot. Sometimes you're going to come back a little bit further, and then on the next pass, maybe you'll stop a little bit sooner. That way, by staggering that, you won't ever leave kind of a visual sight line on the floor as to where you've been standing. So when we inspected the floor earlier, we noticed that there was some sort of water damage or water spot in the corner. We've now sanded over that and it's not coming out. Most likely that is going to be a urine stain from a pet, and that's going to be penetrated all the way through the board, and there's not going to be any way for us to remove it from a sanding process. You could do a board repair and actually remove those boards and place new in there and then sand again. But otherwise, you're going to be left with this stain, and there's nothing we can do about it at this point. When we sand and finish it, it will look better than when we started, but it is, that dark spot's always going to be there. So we talked a little bit earlier about running the machine, the drum machine, that you have to stay in motion while the drum is in contact with the floor. If not, you'll leave a drum mark or a stop mark. I've actually purposely left one of these in the floor. It's not hard to do. You're going to end up doing this. You'll back up over the cord and it'll cause you to do this. You'll nick the wall or run into the wall. It'll cause you to do it. It's not a big deal. You can take it out. I'm going to show you how to do that now. So the way to take this drum mark out of the floor is to cut across it at a 45-degree angle from both directions, and then a third time going straight with the grain. So before we remove all the finish from this floor, we're going to go ahead and show you how to operate the rest of the equipment that might be available to you in your rental center. This is the Rotary Sander. It's a 16-inch machine, very aggressive. It's going to flatten the floor. It does take some skill to operate, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. It is going to come with some sort of sanding head to attach the paper to. This particular head has 6 different 5-inch pads that you just apply the paper to. You might actually get a sanding head that's a single piece of 16-inch paper. Either way, the machine's going to operate the same. So this particular rotary sander is a dust containment unit, so it's intended to be used with a dust skirt and also a vacuum. So you just install the dust skirt. So I've got the backpack vacuum on, it's attached to the machine. In order to operate this, we're gonna lower the handle. We want it down around a comfortable height at your hip. You're gonna lock it back into place. That's important that you get the handle locked back into place. So once you get the handle locked in place, you wanna kind of keep the handle up against your hip. This machine's got a lot of torque to it and it's gonna wanna move left and right. Once you get it stabilized, if you wanna go to the right, you're gonna lower the handle just a little bit. If you want to go to the left, you're going to raise the handle just a little bit, just in tiny fractions will cause a lot of movement. It's a very aggressive machine, and let me show you how to operate it now. All right, in order to turn the machine on, you're going to push the safety button and squeeze the handle. Again, make sure this handle is braced up against your hip because it is going to start with a lot of torque. One of the other types of machines that you'll find available at your rental center is going to be called an orbital sander. This is the OBS 18. It's a 12 by 18 inch deck. Sometimes you'll hear people refer to it as a square buff, but it is a machine that anybody can run. The beautiful thing about it is it doesn't require any skills. There's no way you're going to be able to ruin or damage your floor with this unit. It operates in an orbital fashion, so you don't have to worry about sanding with the grain of the wood. The one drawback to it is going to be slower and less aggressive than the other equipment we've shown you. So if you have a floor that's damaged or in really bad condition, this is probably not the right machine. If you have a floor that's in good condition and you have some time to sand it, this is a great machine for doing that. This is also ideal for actually blending scratch patterns between different machines like the drum machine and the edger, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in this process. So in order to install the sandpaper on this piece of equipment, you simply lean the machine back. The piece of paper is going to come with some sort of either sticky back or a hook back, and it will just apply to the pad that's under that unit. So in order to operate this machine, you're going to plug it in, lower the handle. You can just let the handle float. You don't have to lock it into place. And then again, you're going to push the safety trigger and squeeze the handle. So another type of orbital sander that's available is a multi-disc sander. They're a little bit more aggressive than the square types that we just showed you a moment ago. This particular unit has 3 7-inch heads on the bottom. We'll apply the paper simply by pushing the paper onto the pads. And we'll be ready to go. One of the nice features about this particular unit is that it's very transportable. So it's designed to be multiple components. So you can actually take the handle off by flipping these levers, and the handle lifts off and away. So if you're in a situation where you don't have a truck and you just have a car, this may be the unit that's easier for you to transport to and from your location. It actually has 2 lifting handles, one in the front, one here in the back, so you can get that in and out of your trunk. So to operate this unit, we're going to install the dust bag. It simply slips onto the cuff in the back. And plug this unit in. And we're going to lower the handle. So it just spins here. It's got a collar that spins and raises, and that then allows the handle to drop into place. Again, just like the other orbital sander, we're going to let it float. We're not trying to lock it into place. I'm going to push the safety button, squeeze the handle, and we'll be sanding. Again, this unit is an orbital sander, so you don't have to worry about going with the grain of the wood. And one of the neat features about this item is its triangular shape, and you can rotate the head fairly comfortably and get it into some tight spaces and some closets under shelves or actually into a corner of the room. So we've completed the first cut, or the rough cut, using 36 grit on the drum machine. And you can see, if you look along the wall lines, you can see that we've got these areas that you simply can't get with some of the sanders. So we're going to use the edger for that. And we're going to use the exact same grit paper that we used on the rough cut, which is 36 grit, because you want to be able to blend those scratches with both machines. With this unit, it's got a wrench in the back, and a bolt on the bottom that actually fastens this paper. All right, so it's got a dust bag that goes on the edger. It's like the others, it just simply slips over the pipe. We're gonna plug this unit in. And now this unit's a very powerful unit, so you don't need to do much work. It's gonna do a lot of the work, but you do wanna grip it with both hands, kind of in a crouch down or a kneeling position. There's an on-off switch. We're gonna turn it on. We're gonna leave the pad off the floor when we turn it on, then we're gonna gently lay it down on the floor, and we're gonna move kind of in a clockwise direction around the room. So we've completed the rough cut, both the edges and the middle of the floor. It's really important that our next step is to clean the floor, vacuum it, sweep it, make sure we get any kind of abrasive grit or any kind of debris that we've got on the floor, get it out of the way before we sand it again. We're gonna sand it 2 more times, once with a 60 grit, and then we're gonna sand it with an 80 grit, and then we'll be ready to finish. As soon as we're done doing that, we're gonna come back with another trick of the trade and show you guys how to handle these corners. Spontaneous combustion or an explosion can occur when working with sanding dust. The sanding dust can self-ignite and cause injury or damage, so never leave the equipment unattended if the bag has not been emptied. Sanding dust should be disposed of properly. Always empty that dust into a container located outside of the building. All right, so we've got the floor sanded. Now we've got to deal with these corners. The edger, well, it has a rounded end on it, so you can't get all the way up into the corners. You're gonna leave a little bit of a space. You're gonna take a common paint scraper or hand scraper, and we're gonna actually use this to take care of these corners. You're gonna lay it up in the corner and go with the grain of the wood, and simply pull toward yourself. So that's how we're going to handle the corners. Now the blade on this hand scraper will dull on you, so you're going to use a mill file to actually sharpen this as you go along. One trick of the trade is to make sure when you sharpen this, you do it over a cloth or some other way that doesn't get directly on the floor. If you leave these paint or these metal shavings on the floor, once you apply your finish, you'll end up seeing that later on. So now that you've hand scraped the corners, you're gonna take a piece of sandpaper and you're actually gonna blend those corners back into the floor. Make sure you sand with the grain. So the last sanding step is to blend the scratch pattern. So we've used 2 different sanders on this floor so far, the drum sheen and also the edger. They have 2 completely different scratch patterns, and if we don't blend those, once you put finish on the floor, you're gonna see either a halo or a picture frame effect around the floor. We're gonna use the orbital sander to do this. We've got 120 grit paper on the bottom, and we're just gonna go over the whole floor with this machine, and that'll blend the scratch patterns. So another trick of the trade is once you're completely done sanding the floor is to take a bright halogen or fluorescent light and actually take a look at the floor, focusing on the wall lines and looking for any scratch patterns or imperfections. This is your last chance to fix any of those things prior to applying your first coat of finish or your sealer. As soon as you apply that first coat of sealer or finish, any imperfection is going to jump out at you. So at this point, we're ready to finish the floor. Any debris, any sort of abrasive or any kind of dust that is left on this floor is going to get caught in the finish, and we're not going to like that look. So we're going to vacuum one last time. So we're ready to finish the floor. We're going to start with a coat of sealer. The homeowner in this case has chosen water-based finish and sealer, so we're actually using American Sander's Timber Seal. We're going to put on one coat of sealer and then 2 coats of the Timber Guard finish. Homeowner's also chosen a matte finish for this project. We're going to cut in using a typical nylon 2-inch brush. We're going to use that to cut in around the edges, and then we're going to use a microfiber roller that you can get at most paint centers or any kind of home center. Use a high-end microfiber roller and you're going to get a better result. And the one thing you want to make sure you do is plan your exit. Don't start at the door and work into a blind corner that you can't get out of. Actually start at the far end and then work yourself to the door so you know how to get out. So following the manufacturer's instructions, we allowed the coat of sealer to dry the appropriate amount of time, and then we used an orbital machine with a high grit sandpaper to go ahead and abrade the floor one more time just to really smooth it out. We vacuumed the floor the last time, and now we're actually going to use a damp microfiber mop and go over the floor once just to get up any fine dust that is there before we put down this first coat of finish. So we're going to apply the first of 2 coats of finish. We're using a water-based finish by American Sanders, very similar to the sealer we just put down. This is Timber Guard Pro. The customer has selected a matte sheen, and we're going to apply that the same way we did the sealer. So our project is finished. We've got 2 coats of water-based finish on top of a sealer, super matte finish. It's very clean, very natural look, and it's gonna hold up for years to come. We hope this video has helped you select the right equipment and run that equipment properly so that you can do your own floors as you want. If you're looking for more information or you have any comments or questions about our products, you can find us at americansanders.com.